This is a podcast intended to, we'll say, be an exploration of extraordinary people and how they've overcome adversity with kind of a slant towards medical and physical obstacles along the way, but the discussion carries into many things. Today I'm honored to have a guest that is truly an extraordinary person in what he's gone through adversity-wise and what he continues to still achieve. I have a good friend here, Geoff Real, black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, MMA professional, competitor at the world stage in Jiu Jitsu levels, winner in many of those matches, and as we'll get into, has overcome some physical and medical issues along the way, and it's going to be very valuable for all of us to listen to. Again, I'm Dr. Lucius Pomerantz, orthopedic surgeon, and here we go. Geoff, thanks for coming.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm really stoked to be a part of this project and, whatever we can discuss that may be able to assist others in their journey in combat sports or just athletics in general.
I have no doubt that you'll have good advice and be a good example for anybody, even if they're not into combat sports. But we'll start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about yourself, the beginning, where you grew up.
Well, my name is Geoff Real, as Dr. Luke has mentioned, and moved around as a military brat, and played sports growing up. During high school, I started to encounter some health issues, but even before that, I was to name the obvious. I was born with one hand and had some challenges and had to adjust and modify with certain things. But with that being said, I played as many sports as I could growing up without there being, too much of an obstacle. Anything that seemed challenging to me physically was just always more of a goal to crush. And so I was never the one in PE class last. I was actually at the top. And even when I would play sports, I would definitely push myself to the next level to compete with the top athletes in that sport. And high school, I ended up getting some health issues such as primary sclerosing cholangitis, PSC for short, and also Crohn's disease. And had to have some surgeries and get out of sports for a little bit, and and that just kind of started the ball with my adversity with my health issues.
Yeah. We will touch on all of it. Let's go back to beginning life without a hand. Am I correct in thinking this was congenital band syndrome? You're born without the hand. Do you remember when you may have noticed that you were different?
I think the time I noticed was when other kids were pointing it out. To me, I was, for me, it was normal, of course. My parents mentioned that they had received a prosthetic from Duke University back when we were living in North Carolina, when my dad was stationed there when he was in the Marine Corps. And they would find the prosthetic in the hallway that I'd just taken off. And, the doc just said, well, he seems like he's, doing fine without it. He's already lived naturally without a prosthetic, so, just let him do as he pleases. So I'm sure that was a good point for them to realize that I'd, be all right. And, whatever challenges growing up, I would find a way.
Yes, clearly. And I mean, for what it's worth, even adults who lose their hand through trauma or something like that, many of them don't go with the prosthetic. Perhaps there's limitations to our prosthetics, or it just pertains to the adaptability of people, how they can go through things. They learn new ways. Sports. You said you alluded to some of the sports, kind of traditional sports, baseball, soccer, that kind of stuff?
I always was interested in sports such as baseball, basketball, and even football. But my parents, I always felt that they pushed me more towards soccer because it was safer for me. There wasn't going to be as much of a challenge and disappointment. And they may not admit it, but I feel like their intentions were to try to give me something that might have been a little bit easier to do. But I just didn't want to do sports that involved my legs. I wanted to play all the other normal sports. So high school, I did play football, baseball, but my main thing, since middle school was wrestling. And that was, what I found to be like my bread and butter as far as sports go. I wasn't as talented, I didn't play, baseball or football, at a young age like many kids do. But it was still an interest of mine, and I still, played those sports during high school, and it was fun. But wrestling was something I gravitated more towards.
Yeah, if there's anything specifically about it, or just
I grew up just being super, a little too hands-on with the other kids. Always wanted to play fight. Always wanted to be a ninja. I watched Ninja Turtles as a toddler, and then from then on, it was whatever I can, play around with, or even fight choreography. It always seemed like a problem with the other parents in the neighborhood, but it was just something. For me, it was just playing. To them, I was, being too aggressive. But I would say WWF back in the day. I was putting people in the Boston Crab and the 4-figure leg lock, and one of my friend's dads, he's noticed how, I guess, natural I looked wrestling, and he said, "You better go out for actual wrestling when you get to middle school," and so I did.
There you go. So that was your entrance into grappling.
Yes.
Mine too was in junior high, but mainly I was smaller than everyone else, and I needed sports with weight classes. So
for sure.
And then I realized I was kind of okay at it, so went from there with the grappling. But it was as early as in high school you started having some other medical issues.
Yes. When I was a sophomore, right before I turned 16, I on my way up to a cross-country meet, and I felt like I had the gnarliest stomach ache, and went to the emergency room. They realized that my gallbladder wasn't functioning and removed it, and then, long story short with that, I was diagnosed with primary sclerosing cholangitis, and had to get out of my... I couldn't run cross-country anymore, and then I could not wrestle the entire season sophomore year. And having gone to state as a freshman, I was definitely looking to top that, and I was unable to. So it was definitely a little bit of a slight disappointment in my life. I had other things to distract me, and I played guitar. Surprisingly, with one hand, I played guitar and bass.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
All right. I mean, I didn't know that about you. So setback medically puts you back. You're not able to do the things you wanted to be doing. Can you think back to that and kind of think about how you got through that obstacle, or are you just kind of like, well, it is what it is?
I felt like it is what it is, but like I said, I was able to distract myself at that time. Now I realize how serious I am about grappling. Then I wasn't. Wrestling to me was just, okay, it's the season of wrestling now, and then after that season's done, it's track. There wasn't like a full dedication to one sport yet, as it is now. Back then, when I was 16, I was really into guitar. I was really into playing music, and that was already a hobby of mine before that happened. So I really took up a lot more guitar playing and kept myself distracted with that, and all the other normal stuff kids can do that aren't playing sports. Talking to girls, hanging out with friends, all the normal stuff. So
there were other things. There were other things that you found distractions with. And so with the guitar, with your hands, which is your dominant hand? What were you using?
I would pick with my left hand, which is the hand I'm missing. And I have like these little fingers that didn't grow, and my thumb is what I use for a pick. Huh. And one show, I just joined this band called And the River Bled, and my thumb pick ripped off, and so all this blood was just gushing onto my bass, and everyone's thinking, "Is this part of the show?"
Was it metal?
It was a metal band.
There you go. There you go. Okay. Yeah. Fed into that.
So I definitely really got into music, but I was both into sports as I was into music, and eventually grappling, jiu-jitsu took over once I graduated high school. So high school was all
When did you
about
discover jiu-jitsu?
18.
18.
In my senior year of high school wrestling, I had a friend that mentioned that he was training, and I had some awareness of it, but I wasn't too, knowledgeable about it. Just like everyone else was at that time. They were replaying Hoist Gracie's epic fights back in the 90s, and Stephen Bonner and Forrest Griffin just had their gnarly fight for the first Ultimate Fighter season. So, UFC and MMA was blowing up. So when he had mentioned it, I was very interested. So we went to the gym on the Marine base and rolled out the mats. He showed me some moves, and we rolled it around a bit, and it was fun. And a few months later, I joined the jiu-jitsu gym.
There you go. And what about jiu-jitsu was appealing to you?
I guess the main thing is that you don't have to fight for your spot, to compete and to train. Obviously wrestlers can still train if they're not, the first string, but in jiu-jitsu, I realized like anybody can compete, and I know that competing makes you better. So the wrestlers that aren't able to compete are, I guess limited in their growth, still can get better training with wrestlers that do compete, but the competition's where it's at. I personally feel.
So you were drawn to being able to compete in jiu-jitsu, and
knowing that you can do it full time without anyone telling you, you know what, Geoff, we got to put so and so instead because they're better than you, which was always the case. There's always someone better.
Oh, always someone better.
But for me, it was just like, well, how will I ever get the growth I feel like I want without there being like a squad of guys to wrestle through. Like I had to, mainly in middle school. My high school was a very small wrestling team, so I started every year. And
sure,
whatever weight class I had, that was mine. So, and I was one of the quote unquote more experienced wrestlers, So jiu-jitsu just, it allowed me to compete and train as much as possible. I realized you can train year-round. Like I said, I was only like a seasonal wrestler. I wasn't like all the other dedicated ones that did freestyle off-season or summer camps. The year-round and the consistency to compete was the huge draw. All
right. And kind of turned into a year-round thing for you, where you're just kind of doing it
year-round as much as possible, and it just led me to the next step in my life, and eventually moved to San Diego, where I was exposed to higher level training and all these other teams, and I started training at a gym that was a Fabio Santos affiliate, and I remember them saying like, don't cross train, you don't want to happen to you what happened to Dean Lister, and I'm like, who's Dean Lister? And so I got the rundown, and come to find out, there's always two sides to the story.
Always two sides of the story. And for those who are listening and they don't know the history, coastal California, San Diego, Southern California especially, got a huge head start in jiu-jitsu. It's kind of where the Brazilians put down their camps first, and so people down here got a head start in those early days, and so the evolution's gone on. And Dean Lister, for those of us who don't know, became one of the most accomplished American submission grapplers in history. And you still interact with Dean these days,
yes,
and as do I. So you're training year-round, you're loving it, good sides, bad sides to it. We'll get into a little bit about those bad sides. Nicks, scratches, scrapes, injuries, anything that came up with you, or?
I think honestly, when I was a blue or a purple belt, I found myself overtraining too much and doing a lot of competitions every month. It felt like, even I remember there was one month I competed like 3 times. And for me at that time was a lot. And I know there's competitors out there that do the same, but I started to realize that I was starting to get either burnt out or injured, and not the worst injuries, but just certain things that were like nagging, and it's just I need to really rest. And my old instructor at the time was just like, as much as important it is to train, you need to also rest. And I was like, well, what's rest?
Yeah, I mean, that instructor was a little ahead of the game. traditionally it's been you just keep grinding,
Yes.
and the only time you rest are when you're forced to rest because you've blown something out.
For sure.
But yeah, so you kind of were realizing early on that rest was going to be helpful. Also, given that you were competing all the time, I'm sure you pushed through some injuries. Was there any thought process on how you were going to change the way you did things, or did you just kind of like wing it?
I would just wing it for the most part. If I felt like I was, to a point where I needed to just take a couple days off, I did, and I was also trying to do some yoga from time to time to help out, and that definitely, it felt like that had a tremendous effect, as far as injury prevention goes, and just trying to also do as much fitness outside of the jiu-jitsu gym to keep myself in shape and prevent injuries overall.
Any specific exercises or fitness that you were doing that felt?
I would do like plyometrics. I would do some sprints at the park. I do like a circuit with like push-ups and squats and pull-ups and
Body weight stuff.
Body weight, just purely body weight at the time. And it wasn't until more recently in the past couple years where I finally joined a lifting program that has helped me a lot in not only just overall like physical health, but my competitions, and it's helped me stay strong, especially times where training can be very exhausting, but I'm still in it, still feeling strong, and then when I go compete, I feel like I'm just gliding through, and then I may have like lost close matches, but in those matches I felt awesome versus, oh man, I feel tired.
Sure.
I feel like I'm not getting ahead.
Conditioning, it's powerful. I mean,
Yes.
back in the day, when I was on point with my conditioning, it was just like you could see that guy in front of you wilting.
For sure.
You see him look at the clock and there's still like 3 minutes left. And you're like, oh, I got you.
Right.
I got you. That was just such a powerful feeling. It's a feeling I don't get much anymore, but
Sure.
But yeah, being in shape, having conditioning, and for those of you listening, Geoff often trains with and is a participant in the training camps for Atos, which is premier jiu-jitsu club in the world, has some of the top grapplers there are, and he's in on that, doing it all the time, and you're learning from some of the best and teaching with some of the best. Any lessons that you've kind of gleaned from some of those top competitors?
There's so many people there, and they have their own approach, but the Rutolos and also Kainan Duarte, they definitely have like a mellow approach to things. If they feel burnt out or just exhausted or overtrained, one of them will like get sick if they train too much, and this is actually, kind of like an old teammate that we both had, Taylor Johnson. He was the same way, he would get sick if he was overtrained or get just mentally zapped. Like from those guys, I realized, okay, if I don't need to push through, I'm doing a lot. If I feel like my body's hitting a wall, I need to respect it and just kind of, enjoy other things, go to the beach, take a walk, maybe a hike, kind of get out of the gym, and then also Andre Galvao, who is, phenomenal and decorated competitor and also wholesome instructor. He always tells the competitors, he's like, don't just go from the gym to your home back to the gym. You have a routine, but try to enjoy life. It's like if you live in San Diego, you're paying for very expensive weather.
Yeah.
So might as well enjoy it instead of just being cooped up either home or gym.
All important. And as we touch on that mental side, the aspect of rest seems to be important. You mentioned things like going for a walk, getting outside. Is there a specific thing that you feel when you're doing those things? Are you trying to achieve a blank slate in your head? Are you just trying to have fun? Is it time to think about other things? What are you doing with your time off?
When if I go take a walk, especially with my dog, I'm having a good time, and it resets my head to a degree. Just enjoy some sun. Just kind of break away from the norm of the grind. Just to take a moment to appreciate our good weather and just playing around with my little dog in the park. It's a good time. It's cool to see my pet having a good time, and I'm like, okay, he's cruising. I'm digging it.
Can do it too. Used a few words of appreciate, and they're finding more and more that gratitude, even a gratitude practice, can be helpful in improving mental state. So, in a way, you've there's some gratitude there. Getting outside, sunlight. We're realizing more and more the importance of getting exposure to sunlight as far as overall health and all of that kind of stuff. So you're discovered. You found those things out on your own. I do want to kind of double back a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
Other health issues. You were kind of knocked down a bit with some of this stuff, up to on how detailed you want to get.
For sure.
You certainly went through extra health stuff that definitely would push most people's ability to bounce back. So,
yeah, I always say being born with one hand is a walk in the park compared to the health issues that I've gone through. I had my gallbladder removed back in high school, and then after that, I would just have routine procedures where they would just have to check up or get some biopsies or whatever of my liver and just check in and see where I was at.
Liver biopsies.
Yeah.
It's just not fun, but yeah.
Yeah. So, my first time I was awake and, that was pretty gnarly. The pain radiated to my shoulder and, it was not very fun. And especially the way the doctor prepped me, I'm like, how bad is this going to hurt? She's like someone's kicking you in the nuts. I was like, oh, geez, you're sticking a 6-inch needle and you're telling me not to gasp or else you're going to tear across my organ. Like, great, let's go for it. So scary moments like that, but, those are routine. And after a while, they would just put me out and maybe, do, routine colonoscopy or an endoscopy or, a biopsy at the same time, whatever. So, it was just routine for me for a while. And then, once I got to 26 or 25, I moved back to San Diego, and I had been teaching and training in Yuma, Arizona, which is my hometown where I started jiu-jitsu. Just to kind of give a brief timeline, I started in Yuma, Arizona, moved to San Diego in 2011, moved to Florida for 11 months, came back to San Diego and received my black belt, and then moved back to Yuma for about a year. And during that year, competed against top level names in jiu-jitsu. It was, I was truly living the dream. I felt like the best decision for my training was to move back to San Diego, and I'd already established connections with certain people. Jeff Glover was one of them, Dean Lister, to add, and so I moved back, and I was feeling very optimistic about life. I'm like, all right, I've been crushing it. I've been competing against these world champions. First time on a world's podium was at black belt at Nogi Worlds. Super
huge
pumped
accomplishment.
Definitely pumped about that. And then a few weeks later, I got an ultrasound done and found out I had testicular cancer. And it was definitely, a shock, to say the least. But I had noticed that I had an enlarged testicle, and I had brought it up to my parents, and they just kind of dismissed it. Like, one's usually bigger than the other, one hangs lower than the other. I'm like, yes, but this looks abnormal. So eventually I kept bugging them, and I had friends and an ex-girlfriend who was a nurse or becoming a nurse. And, so the people around me were really pushing me to get checked out. So once I did, we found out, and everything seemed to come to a stop right at that time. And it's very scary because, not only is my health and my life is seems to be in danger. The things I love to do might not be available anymore, such as training jiu-jitsu and competing. It was a huge downer for me at that time. But I had the surgery and found out that the tumor was very mild and I didn't need any chemo or radiation.
Okay.
And having had the liver issue, my oncologist was very concerned that if we had to do chemo or radiation, we would only have to be able to do like a half dose or a microdose or whatever, because what's gonna go first, my liver or the tumor?
Oh, jeez.
So luckily I didn't have to. I dodged a huge bullet in that regard and just only needed the surgery. And, it took a few months to recover, and, just checked in with blood work and CT scans and all that fun stuff. And,
yeah. And as you were going through this process, did you have a support structure, friends, family, or?
Absolutely. I my last event, I'd signed up for the last one of the year. And this was after I was diagnosed, or I had signed up before I was diagnosed, and the urologist told me I could not train, let alone compete. And I'm like, well, I'm thinking, yeah, you say that, but I've already signed up and paid money for this tournament, and who knows the next time I'll be able to do this. So, when I competed at this event in LA, I have lots of family there. All my mom's side of the family showed up to my jiu-jitsu event, and they don't know anything about jiu-jitsu. Hardly ever made the effort to show up before. And obviously not everyone's, in that area when I compete. So, to see everyone there was pretty cool and, comforting, to say the least. And to add, I had the longest match at this sub only no time limit event, with a match that went an hour and 45 minutes.
An hour and 45 minutes?
Yeah.
Wow. And for those listening, sub only means the only way the match ends is a submission. The person taps out. So no points, no nothing, just an hour.
Generally, matches are like anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes, So an hour and 45, Dean Lister made a joke. He's like, he could have watched Titanic in the time of my match.
Yeah, and for those of you out there, 5 minutes is plenty.
Right.
That you'll get your heart rate up in 5.
For sure.
So, okay, quite a test that you've been through there. You've certainly accomplished a lot. You've certainly won a lot. But there's been some losses. How do you deal with those losses along the way?
I feel like I'm a pretty good loser in a sense where I keep my head up high. I'm humble in defeat and in victory. But I just know it's part of the game. It's, if you lose a match, you can take that match and really analyze where you went wrong. What were your errors? What was your game? Did you have a game going into that match? Did you drill that game? Well, okay, if you didn't prepare in drilling or game planning, then, you should manage your expectations a little lower, But if you really put it out there and you did everything you could, then no regrets, So I feel like the ones that are unprepared and don't get the results tend to get a little bit more down on themselves, but, that's their own choice.
Yeah.
So for me personally, I put my heart and soul into my training, and so if I lose, it's like, okay, what could I have done better? What can I incorporate next time into my game to beat whatever they use to shut my game down? And with every competition you get better, like I mentioned before, competition is huge growth for an athlete. So
yeah.
It's part of the game. It's better to have a competition loss than to not compete at all.
The iron sharpens iron saying, and then you either win or you learn.
Yes.
And they're thrown around a lot in our world for a good reason, though, because it's very true. And getting out there, and unless you've actually competed and put yourself out there, it's an experience that you can't quite relay on to someone who's never done it before, especially in a combat sport. You've been in the cage, you've fought MMA, you've had gloves on, and people are screaming and yelling, and you got lights on, you can't see anything else but the guy in front of you who's trying to punch you in the face and hurt you. And those experiences are there's nothing quite like it that's legal, and certainly for me, that's where I think I got a lot of help, where I was pretty anxious growing up. I would be an anxious kid, just a soccer game coming up, and I'd be so nervous, and even wrestling tournaments, I'd be so nervous. But then I fought in a cage, and kind of puts everything else in perspective. The volume gets turned down a little bit, and okay, well, what I used to get really nervous about, that hard training partner in practice.
Right.
You used to get nervous about that, well, whatever,
Right.
Whatever. it's time to learn. Okay, you got tapped out. Let's learn something from it. So
For sure.
So putting yourself in those situations, those extremes, kind of puts everything else into perspective and hopefully opens up some learning. So seems certainly like you've done that. You've interacted with a lot of doctors along the way. Good things, bad things, things that you'd like to see doctors do differently.
I'm very fortunate to know you because, you're a doctor that's going to, you're going to assess my injury and you're going to be like, okay, you'll be back on the mats in this time, right? Where other doctors will be advising me to quit jiu-jitsu altogether, and, I even had a doctor back when I was actually coming up to Rady's Children's Hospital when I was living in Arizona, and the GI doc was heavily advising me to not do any contact sports because of my liver, and that if I wasn't wanting to do football, that I needed to wear a rib protector. So I think about this and the things that I've done since then, where people have kicked me in my my body, where all my organs are, kidney, liver, all that stuff. And, obviously there's that risk. But, I haven't had any issues, while I've sparred or even fought. Luckily, they're always just trying to hit me in the head. So.
Yeah, I guess that's one thing, one good thing to look at it. And, physicians, certainly, we're trying to look out for the best interests of our patients. And, certainly when you're going through all these health issues, MMA was not on any physician's radars. We had, they probably thought it was, they probably still do, a lot of them, but the human cockfighting is just this bloody violent thing, and so they didn't have a full understanding of it. And you've had some real medical issues, and so it's like, hey, life would be easier on you if you didn't do it. But what I've realized is mental health and things are important to patients. You tell them they can't do something, that's not helpful. Right. They love something, they're going to want to keep doing it, and you tell them they can't do it because, and it's like, well, so they're going to find a way. And I guess, as an orthopedic surgeon, I'm dealing mainly with the limbs and joint issues and things like that. And, I know because I put myself through it too, but I've seen a lot of people also overcome obstacles of just kind of like, all right, well, if your wrist is hurting, here's some things you can do to avoid that. And, there's always the caveat of like, getting an x-ray wouldn't hurt. Right, for so sure. You kind of know what's going on. Yeah. But yeah, I certainly try to understand where the patient's coming from, their priorities, and working around that. And there have been times where it's like, look, you got to take a break for a little bit with the long-term goal of getting you back to doing things you want to do. But for right now, you got to rest. And some guys take that well. Some guys, it's really hard on them. And you alluded to it earlier, having some other things that you can fall back on for those brief times where you may not be feeling 100% for whatever reason. I've had you for a while. Anything else that you want to kind of share with anyone? Or
you touched up on mental health, and I think that's important too, because the body is, without having a strong mind, you can't put your body through any challenging activity, I feel. So and to some degree, some people can like mentally block things out and just go autopilot. But I feel like it's important to address, the things that make us tick, that can trigger us, the things that motivate us. So, on top of, and to be honest, like I never thought about how like my surgeries or my injuries are, forms of trauma, and the aftermath of dealing with that trauma. Am I ignoring something? Is there something I should be talking about? Should I just do a wellness check once in a while, just to see where I'm at? I feel, the mental health, whether it's just, just talking to a friend or talking to a professional can go a long way, especially, I remember when I was, not able to train after having my tumor removed. It was definitely a lot of downtime, and I had a friend that was just like, this is a good time to take it easy, just enjoy, not training hard, and just kind of do the things that you're not able to do when you are training. So, it's definitely tough. You always want to get out there, but I've always made a comeback. After my cancer surgery, 6-7 months later, I had my first MMA fight and won. And mentally, I was just on a good high because of the setbacks I had before that. And then more recently, I had injured my ankle really bad after the East Coast trials last year. And, couldn't walk right. I was in pain, waking up in the middle of the night in my sleep. And, had to come back, PT, lifting weights, training with a very limited game, trying to keep myself safe. And, I had a pretty good moment at West Coast trials that Flow Grappling caught. And, people are like, man, you look so pumped, and it's just like, was it because you finished that guy like super quick? And it's just like, well, that, but also knowing my struggles to get here, and also to not have like one match to win, but two, and it be recognized, with all the the grappling community. That was definitely a good moment for me, where it's just you can endure, you can get through hard times. And I see a lot of athletes who are tough, that they get injured, and man, their mental game goes way out the window. So and I've been there, but it just takes time. Time heals all.
Sure. And we've all come across him, the guy who's indestructible. The guy who just, another level of human being, and inevitably injury will come. And that's probably pretty hard on them if they've never had to deal with it. You've had to deal with some stuff along the way, and you've battled and kept grinding. And it also sounds like part of the journey for you wasn't the end goal of getting your hand raised, which does happen, but it was also the grind of overcoming those obstacles. And I guess the journey is as important as the end, and you're definitely an amazing example of overcoming adversity, putting yourself out there. There's a lot of people who don't even step out in the cage, let alone compete, let alone win, let alone overcome all the things you have. So hopefully people are going to see that there's ways of overcoming things, and see you as an example of a person who can achieve a lot. Definitely.
It's just all comes down to how bad do you want it?
Sure. And on that note, we've touched on it a few times, mental, taking care of your body physically, lifting weights, training, all that kind of stuff is important, but taking care of your mind, getting that rest, getting outside, having that structure, that friend support, and I'm glad the stigma is going away, but seeing a therapist or having someone you can talk to get through things, because certainly there's a lot of stress out there, and a lot of people try to do it alone, and they don't achieve what they could.
No, I completely agree. It's back in 2020 when we all couldn't do anything, I started speaking to a therapist on a regular basis, and it's and not just because of COVID, but there were other things I definitely needed to address, with my trauma and my pain, and just all the things I've had to overcome. Yeah, those are good things, but what was the effect on me, that eventually became compounded into self-medicating, or just partying on an extreme level. Just like, I'm just having fun. But no, I'm actually masking some pain right now that I just never addressed, So having and not ever, I get the whole stigma of, I do, but I don't. It's, you're going to have an unbiased opinion, or a professional professional insight on what's going on. And we're not all as tough as we make ourselves out to be, so
Very true.
It's definitely an important thing that I feel a lot of people overlook. And and I always encourage it with my friends, and they tend to shoot it down, and that's where I leave it. And if they want to talk to me personally, then I'll give them, I'll advise them based off of my own experiences, and especially what my therapist will tell me from time to time. So mental health is very important, and it's helped me tremendously. Just like lifting weights, you gotta work your brain.
Yes, you gotta work the brain out. Keeping the mind sharp keeps the body sharp, and yes, and you're a testament to all of it. It's been awesome to watch you over the years achieve what you've been achieving, and as an example, I see patients who are down on themselves, they've got an injury, and they don't see a way out. And I can always pull on someone like you as an example of, hey man, you can get through it. I know it. So, Geoff, thank you for talking with us today. I'm sure people will be inspired by your story, and we'll be talking more.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Doctor. Appreciate it.
All right, Geoff. Thanks.